Yeah, I never thought that I could do anything about my migraines, and no medication ever worked. And so I felt for most of my life, I felt helpless.
What was a migraine like?
Um, for for the majority of the time that I've had migraines, they have presented in a very classic manner where I get the visual distortion, the aura, and then I get the absolutely devastating headache that feels like a drill going through my brain. And then I would have to throw up over and over and over and over and over again. Um, and that was the only way that I could get the headache and the pain to stop. And I remember the first time that I got a migraine, and it woke me up out of sleep. Um, and I remember at the time feeling basically scared and confused. Like I had no idea what was going on, and I had no prior experience um, to draw on to kind of situate myself. Like I just, um, yeah, it freaked me out. And for a number of years, the they would put me out for half a day. I would just be like 6 7 hours. I would just be kind of laid to waste. And so yeah, I didn't know what to do about them other than to to build up a kind of dread. So like always that fear, that anticipation for the next, like when is the next one gonna strike? Um, and again, like no medication that the doctors ever prescribed seemed to do anything at all. And I remember even kind of being superstitious about it, like God forbid I talk about that I get migraines because then I'm gonna get one. If I'm like thinking about a migraine, then I'm gonna get a migraine. Um, yeah, so at a certain point, I just was like resigned and was like, well, this is just the way it's gonna be. I'm just gonna kind of go through this cycle over and over again. Um, and then a couple of years ago, I had joined I had joined a program and had started to learn some internal family systems, some parts work, which was it just in its simplicity. Um, it was like, well, in my present moment experience, how can I um, differentiate between these different parts of myself that are all interrelating with each other, um, and and if I'm in a sort of conflict with myself, or I'm in some tension or adversity, like how does that um, that shift and starting to like identify these different aspects of myself, how does that actually transform my present moment experience? So I had started doing that, um, and I was working outside in the bright um, California sun, and I started to get the aura, and I, for whatever reason, decided, okay, I'm going to try an experiment and see what happens if I basically do parts work um, with this migraine. And I was working with a friend, and I was like, is it okay if I kind of start to do some weird stuff over here? Like, I just want you to know that I am okay and there's nothing to worry about. And she was totally cool with it. So I basically I basically just sat on the ground and kind of got myself up in like fetal position, just like whatever whatever felt like most comforting. And and then I went like straight to that little boy who got that migraine for the first time. And I realized that he was terrified. And he had never had anyone tell him that things were going to be okay. And so with parts work, you can do that with yourself, right? And so I had to kind of like, I distinguished between him and then my like the mother part of me, the like all embracing, um, comforting, everything is going to be okay, sweetie. And I basically sort of visualized what it was like to hold him, and I was talking out loud as well, and just like letting him know that everything is going to be okay, and there's nothing to worry about, and I've got you, um, and to like, there's a way where you can tap into that quality where like you really mean it, and and it's like totally solid. And as soon as I did that, I started um, crying. He started crying. That like freaked out little boy started to let himself freak out. And so it was like a mixture of like grief and also just kind of like a hysteric like overwhelm and like all those emotions that I felt like I never actually let myself feel when I was 14, 15 years old. Um, and at this point, I had a splitting headache. Um, but the really, really crazy thing was that uh, the longer that I held myself in that space, I started to notice that there was a transformation in my experience of the pain. The actual sensation started to change, and um, and after probably like a half hour, 45 minutes, it actually dawned on me that like, oh my God, what I was experiencing as pain, as like the worst pain imaginable, is starting to feel pleasurable. Like, well, that's crazy. How is that possible? Um, and and so then like just the recognition of that inspired a this kind of like um, this new level of excitement around it. Like, oh my God, like something is really changing. And again, in the context of years and years and years of taking pills and nothing ever working. Um, and so I just like held myself in that space, and by an hour and a half or so, the pain had gone, and I basically felt like I was tripping. Like I felt just total kind of ecstatic euphoria, super light, uh, you know, the kind of sensations that I have had, let's say on ecstasy or mushrooms or marijuana or anything like that, where yeah, and it was um, just because I held myself and let myself cry basically, and something about that, like the deep recognition of knowing that I was there for myself. Um, yeah, it transformed the entire experience. And so ever since then, the really cool thing is that I no longer throw up. So I no longer have the physical purge. So I'll get the aura and I'll get a headache. The headaches aren't as bad anymore. Um, and sometimes my body will just kind of shake it out. And that'll often come on like very involuntarily. It's almost like the body just knows what it needs to do. Um, but the physical purging, the puking part is no longer an aspect to it, and it feels really it feels really connected um, to that moment, um, where like the body actually somehow learned that there was another way, right? It's like there's another way to be in relationship with myself, which means that there's another way to be in relationship with this painful experience, right? I'm no longer a victim. I'm no longer suffering. It's just there's some sensations, right? And what is my relationship to those sensations? I can actually have control over that. Um, yeah, so that's been a really profound experience for me.